Hello and welcome back to the A24 On the Rocks podcast. I will be your host for this episode. My name is Kelly and I'm here with two of my other co-hosts. We're missing someone else tonight.
He had to drive to Atlanta.
What he does in Atlanta is his own business, which I mentioned because on this episode, we will be discussing the, spoiler right now, wonderful, beautiful masterwork that is Moonlight, an A24 movie from 2016 that really put A24, I think, on the map. So it'll be our pleasure to discuss that on this episode. But before we get started, I wanted to let you guys know that with each discussion, we have a drink in hand, and my drink of choice for this episode is an Oberon. Eric, what are you drinking?
I swear to God, I got the movie wrong. I thought we were reviewing La La Land tonight.
Now, why would you think that?
We're not reviewing La La Land? Okay. We're reviewing Moonlight. Okay. I've seen that too, so it's okay. I'm drinking an Embrace...
I didn't get that joke before today.
I'm drinking an Embrace Equity New England IPA from Eastern Market Brewing Company, because I thought it would be on point for this discussion. My name's Eric, and up next we have Kevin.
Good evening, world. This is Kevin K. Konkonachek, and tonight I am drinking a little ditty from the Central Standard Distillery here in Milwaukee. It's their North Brandy, but it's mixed with Hofbrau Brew. So it's a German beer mixed with Wisconsin brandy, put up into a bottle, and served over ice.
Great.
It's absolutely flippin' delicious.
Yeah.
A24 on the rocks.
Holy cow. Okay, so everybody, like I said, welcome back to our podcast and our discussion today. As previously mentioned, this movie we're going to be talking about is Moonlight, directed by Barry Jenkins as his second feature film. It's loosely adapted from a unproduced play by Tarell Alvin McCraney called In Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue. It was, Eric, this is an independent film, correct?
Yeah, but this is, as Kevin was telling me beforehand, this is the first film A24 actually produced. Out of all the films they have distributed so far, this is the first one they produced. So A24 actually put their money into it, like personally, to make it.
When I say it kind of put A24 on the map, I was actually extremely on the ball.
Absolutely.
It's
as more than a distribution company, as a production company. Because, yeah, I feel like after Room and Ex Machina the year before, they had some credit, but now they're, I think, taken more seriously as a production company for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember seeing this movie. I'll say now too, this isn't my first time watching it. Eric, I know it's not your first time. Kevin, was it your first time?
Yeah, actually it was.
Okay. So I think, Eric, you and I saw this back in 2016, correct?
I think I saw it in theaters, and then didn't we watch it together too, though, after,
Maybe.
When it came out to streaming
Maybe
or
you
something?
are right.
Yeah.
But what an impactful movie that this is. Like, you could tell that it was going to be a classic right away. And even on this rewatch, I was just blown away once again. That said, an extremely award-winning film, very highly nominated. It got, I think, the recognition that it deserved to have, except if you want to talk about La La Land. Eric, do you want to talk about that for a sec?
The La La Land Moonlight
what's the
controversy?
What's the controversy?
Well, basically, Best Picture came up, and La La Land was like it was a huge film that year because it was like a Hollywood musical, and everybody kind of thought, oh yeah, the Hollywood musical, like throwback to old Hollywood, that's going to win it. And I think it was Warren Beatty, he got the envelope, and I guess he got the wrong envelope when he was reading, or when they were reading out the Best Picture winner, and so he said La La Land, and I think on the envelope it actually said Best Actor La La Land, so he just was given the wrong envelope. I don't think there was anything insidious or, controversial. It was just Warren Beatty making a mistake, and also the Oscars making a mistake. They read it off, and I think the whole La La Land, like, the directors and producers walked up there, and then they saw the envelope, and they said, like, it's not us. Like, you guys won. Moonlight, you won. And then like all those people had to come off stage, and the directors, producers, writers of Moonlight had to come on stage and just be like, "Oh wait, yeah, we won,"
What?
And it was a really weird, awkward like 10 minutes there, but it was
unconventional way to win Best Oscar for a completely unconventional movie.
Absolutely. Like it is like groundbreaking in so many ways, all the way up to it winning these awards and recognition in the end. Like, that's just crazy. Eric, thanks for telling us that.
For sure.
Yeah, I remember. I love watching. I like have an odd part of me where I still love watching the Oscars. So I was watching when it happened, and it was strange.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this said too, I kind of wanted to ask you, Kevin, like, as somebody who hasn't seen this movie before, I want to know the impact, the like immediate, what did you think was going to happen? What actually happened? Just riff. I want to hear it.
Beautiful. So, as you alluded to, I absolutely knew of this movie's existence and the fact that it won an Academy Award and that it was groundbreaking for the subject matter at the time that it won. We had just really started seeing a lot of headway into a lot of gains for equality among the LGBTQ plus community. We had really started to see a lot of more acceptance, equality across the board. And when this movie was created, and I knew that the subject matter related around, African American culture, Black culture, and in this circumstance, gay culture, it was kind of that message was still strong enough all the way through to 2023 when I finally get to the movie that I know that that's the message of this movie going into it. I also know that it was widely regarded as a beautiful movie, and as you said right when we started this full thing, that it was, spoiler alert, gorgeous, phenomenal, all of those things. So I knew about that from just the we'll call it the zeitgeist, right? Just the cultural conversation around this movie. Going into it, I knew that I wanted to give myself a great space to watch it. I wanted to give myself good sound, good lighting. I wanted to give myself all of the trappings that you need to really embrace a movie for the first time. And I'm really glad that I did, because, like you said, right off the bat, you can already tell that there's something special about this film. And every moment that I find myself writing something down about it being beautiful, or I really enjoyed this taste or something, I was not surprised at all. Meaning that it started out on such a high note that every note that it hit was a continual uptick of that peak, and it just continued to deliver on all of those different notes. And when we break those down, we can kind of elaborate on why I thought about those things. But I just was super impressed with the 2 hours of how it kept me just elevated, interested, and want to just learn more and make me appreciate something that I already kind of appreciated. So that was really kind of a cool juxtaposition of seeing the content on the screen and knowing that all of the things that everyone said about this movie are absolutely validated and rewarded, and not just my opinion, but everything that I learned about the movie afterwards, and doing my reviews and looking at the interviews and kind of going down my notes, and just every single person who's like, this is an A+ or a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, whatever it may be, it's all of those things are validated. So it was just a really cool movie viewing experience for me.
Yeah, I like the word that you said, that it kept you staying elevated while you watched the movie, because I know exactly how you mean by that. And you said it hit those notes and then it kept hitting them, and that's so rare for a movie to be able to do. And something about this movie too is, I think that one of the reasons it's able to do that so well is that if you break it down, the plot isn't too complicated. It's a pretty simple enough plot, but it is powerful, emotional, like over your head. And I think that balance is what strikes it as just keeping you there with it the entire time, on top of the cinematography and general pacing of the whole story. But Eric, I wanted to ask you kind of about your thoughts on the plot. Did you find it, like I said, simple and powerful? Do you find it something else? I'm kind of curious your thoughts and how engaging that made the whole story.
I don't want to call it simple, because like we've been saying, this film was such a groundbreaking film that it had never, like, this kind of story had never been shown on screen. Like the story of a Black queer man and what it takes to grow up in a community that doesn't accept you. And Tarell McCraney, he actually said, in communities without privilege or power, men seek to gain it in other ways. And one way in which males do this in such communities is to try and enhance their masculine identity, knowing that it often provides a means to more social control in a patriarchal society. And showing this kind of toxic masculinity and how it permeates our society and also marginalized communities a lot, I don't want to call it simple. I think at its core, it's a character study of one person growing up being gay and also growing up with a mother as an addict, which also, like, I don't think I've seen that before in film. So I think this film has a lot of depth to it. It doesn't have, like, extremely complicated plot. It just has a lot of depth to it, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, there's so much going on with this story. So I don't mean simple as like drip down or anything in that way. Kevin?
Yeah.
Here's what I took from when you said simple, and I agreed with it in the sense that it is a tale of it's very biographical in a lot of ways, right? It's a very real tale of the upbringing of our playwright, and as well as the upbringing of our director, Barry Jenkins. They talk about it that Barry Jenkins and Tarell Alvin McCraney both grew up in the same neighborhood on the same block and attended the same elementary school. So a lot of these things that Tarell wrote about when he wrote the play 10 years before the movie even came out, he could relate to these things already. And it goes on to actually come out that when Barry Jenkins was approached with this project, he was described it as, this is a movie. It isn't about you, but it's about you. And that's all it took. And he was immediately hooked, and he read the screenplay and wrote the screenplay based off of the script, and it just continues on. So the point that I'm trying to make is that because it's so biographical, it seems simple because it's truly just their lives and what they dealt with. And it's so deep, but it's so, we just see it and we just feel it and we're immersed in it. And we'll go on to that when we get to cinematography. But wow, just great.
Yeah, I saw a New York Times review that said it's almost unbearingly personal, and at the same time, it's an urgent social document. And like I'm saying, where it's this like line that's being walked between these two things, and it just hits. And it's a story that I'm so glad is out there and so beautifully made. And I want to talk about how beautifully made it is, but I want to talk about one of the themes first. Like I said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of themes. And the one that we're already talking about, which I think is maybe at the forefront, is this performed masculinity, especially among Black men, especially how they're usually portrayed in any kind of film, and how this one breaks that down and shows us from childhood to adulthood. And we know this character. We follow him along until he is the way that he is. It just, like, jaw on the floor for me. I love the way that they break down masculinity throughout this film, even if, and I'm not saying that it should have the gay aspect removed from it, but even if that part was removed, that performed masculinity is so well shown. Eric, do you want to kind of touch on this theme?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a theme that closely resonated with me. The other two people here know this, but I guess our podcast listeners don't know this. I'm a openly bisexual man, and for years I kind of felt like not a lot of people needed to know I was bisexual, and growing up I kind of felt this pressure to be more masculine, not quite to the extent that like Chiron did. There was definitely a toxic masculinity growing up in my community too. I was bullied, I was called gay slurs, and I always had to kind of put up walls. And I feel like our society wants to box people in, and even when I got to college, it was a more accepting atmosphere of like queer people, but I was kind of constantly made to feel I had to be either gay or straight and not equally attracted to both men and women, and that still persisted into adulthood. I'm married to a woman, and I felt like a lot of people when I came out wouldn't believe me when I said I was bisexual, and this includes even a few of my close friends didn't believe me when I said it. They thought I might have just went through a phase, or I was bi-curious. And that kind of toxic masculinity, I think, just permeates our society, like I was saying before. That's why this film is so great. It's like an even more extreme case in growing up in a toxically masculine community, because if you don't show that you're masculine, you will, you're going to get the shit beat out of you. Like I took some verbal abuse growing up, but here, like there's some very extreme consequences for coming out as gay in marginalized communities, and that's why like this film is so good at showing self-acceptance and the guide or like the journey to it, and it's so good at showing how people try to pigeonhole men and kind of force them to become someone they really aren't. And Hollywood also has a really long history of not making black people into fully fleshed out characters with depth. And there also, there aren't, like we were saying, a lot of great depictions of black queer people in cinema. That's why this film is so unique. It tackles the subject of toxic masculinity and, trying to come to a journey of self-acceptance. It tackles it so wonderfully by doing it with these intimate camera shots, intimate cinematography. It really is so unique and groundbreaking. I've been saying that over and over again, but it can't be said enough.
Yeah, it so shows like when that tough exterior is just what it is. It is an armor, and it is an armor built based on how you had to survive growing up. And they just break it apart in such a good way. Kevin?
I like the toxic masculinity is absolutely a massive part of this first theme, but I think the positive masculinity is also something that can be taken away very much from not only the first act, but this entire film. I mean, we get great characters like our Juan character played by Mahershala Ali. Like that character, his performance, there's a reason that he won supported actor for that role. Like that was absolutely incredible. And the fact that our director only put him in for the first act and knew that removing him after one act was going to be absolutely jaw-wrenching for the audience just goes also to show again how effective his character was. But my original point is his masculinity, what is displayed on the screen, is one of it's flawed masculinity, right? He does have this caring aspect, this fatherly aspect where he's only cares about maybe the people that are kind of downtrodden in his life, and he wants to take care of them, but at the same time, at what cost? And we see that later with some of the drug relationships that character has. But initially, his character is established as someone who does have some good qualities of what generally is accepted as a masculine character. We don't have a ton of other great examples. I suppose adult Kevin in the third film may be another example of what masculinity can be looked at as a healthy one, in the sense of he's kind of come full circle and accepted maybe who he is or kind of where he fits. And he talks about his son a lot. And it's that same idea, right? It's that paternal masculinity, that there's still that aspect of it. And then, of course, the lack of father figure in Little's life, like in general. So all of those things kind of tailor on themselves, but it's still the same theme, just with a little bit of a twerk on it.
Yeah, and you're so right. It is that there is this like positive masculinity. The fact that he like lifts up his community all the way to the actual film showing us he is helping Little keep his head above water. He is teaching him how to survive out there, as only like a figure like him could do. And the way, I'm jumping right into cinematography at this point, because that's such an iconic shot, and it says so much. And something that stood out to me on the second watch even more so is I don't know that I've seen another movie that keeps the camera half in the water at the same time.
Jaws, maybe.
All right, I haven't seen Jaws, so it doesn't count.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay.
Everyone's turning off the podcast. They're like, this woman doesn't know film. But I love that we are in the water, too. It's like this in between of it's a struggle, and you see these like waves crashing in, and you're keeping your head just barely above the water too. Then you see him as he actually starts to learn how to swim, and he's actually laughing, and now it feels like we're going with the flow of it, and we know it's going to keep moving. But it's just, they could have shot that a number of ways, but just like every other part of this movie, from my perspective, everything is so intentional. I know we just talked themes, and now I'm jumping into cinematography, and I decided we're going to stay in cinematography for a little bit longer. Do either of you have, I mean, there's so many, but I want to give us the chance to kind of talk about maybe some specific shots that stood out to you that you just like really want to show your appreciation for at this time. Eric, you can go ahead.
Oh, Eric, you first.
I lied. Kevin, you go.
All right. So the first scene that came to my mind right away was the scene after Little is offered to stay at Juan's house, and he spends the night in the room, and everything is white. Everything is white. The whole room is white, and it really, really, really gave me this sense of just peace and calm, and how it's a rescue and a haven and a place for him, and it accomplished that just by color. And I was like, phenomenal. All right, I'm already hooked. Whatever you're doing, I'm on the rest of the way, because his color usage was phenomenal. Obviously, it was set in Miami, and the fact that they stuck to their guns and said, no, it has to be here in Miami. I don't care if it's going to cost 30% more, which was literally what they quoted as saying if they would have taken the tax breaks and moved out of the state, they could have saved a whole bunch of money. And for an independent film that doesn't have a bunch of money to begin with, for them to creatively say, I'm sticking to these guns because of all of the reasons that we see, because Miami's so gorgeous, but it's also like a dirty gorgeous, and we see that with a lot of these other establishing shots. Even the opening scene where we get that big 360 and we see everything, right? We get the drug dealer on the corner, and then we get Juan as he's interacting with him, and the old man. It's just you get immersed within the first 2 minutes of this film, and it's like, I'm keeping you here, and it does so many different things too, because I'm now thinking back, I'm like, oh yeah, and then we get that camera, the jarring footage as he's running through the field that is like a handy cam, and then we get the direct staring into the camera first person personas throughout all three of the acts. So the fact that he's consistently taking these things and using them consistently through all three acts is brilliant. Breaking that fourth wall down and having that actor or actress stare straight into the camera and address the audience was brilliant. It was quoted as basically he decided, Barry Jenkins, that he was going to take kind of the elements he saw on stage. Shakespeare, for example, and Hamlet, there's many times when he's literally addressing the crowd, like the audience themselves. And that's what makes people immersed in the product itself. So he's like, well, I'm just going to do this in film. I could continue about the pastel colors and all the different scenes. We get the one famous, not the famous scene that sticks out in my mind, where the mom's wearing red and you get the neon in her room as she's about to follow a John in the door, and she's screaming silently at Little, and you don't get anything but the silence there. And then the colors and just that whole scene in general was brilliant. Little staring, or not even Little, the second Chiron, when he's staring at the mirror before he snaps and goes to school the next day with the blood all over his face and the water. The bathtub shots, we just talked about the ocean. Even the shots at the diner and how the light of the diner is just, that's the focal point of everything. The warmth of it, how it's dark, everything outside, but the warmth is inside the diner. I'm continuing to go because, like you said, there's so many different things that grabbed my attention. There was that shot in the diner when the door is open and you could hear the cars rushing by, and all of a sudden the car noise turns into the ocean waves, and just like the subtle sound mixing that went into that scene on top of it all. It was just brilliant. So those are just a couple of my highlights, and I'm sure I missed a couple.
Yeah, just a couple.
Yeah, just a couple.
No, you hit a lot of the good ones. I remembered on this watch specifically the Paula scenes, his mother. Naomie Harris, every single actor in this movie just took my breath away. But her impact on this movie and the way that they filmed her shots broke my heart. And another usage in the cinematography that they use is they will purposely cut the sound and the visuals away from each other on like really close shots of people's faces, and it's disorienting, but it makes you listen harder, but it makes you focus on the face harder. Those purposeful, just like artistic, and that doesn't even describe it enough, but it changes your perspective and your experience while watching the film. Eric, I want to give you a chance to talk on this too.
I want to even focus more on the shots of people look like staring right into the camera. They feel like portraits, like artistic portraits of people. And they really, I don't know, they make you feel like you kind of know this person in a way. Especially that shot of Chiron staring into the mirror after, he got the shit beat out of him, and he is putting his face into the ice. And then, like, that overhead shot of him putting his face into the ice is one thing, because you see this blood come into the sink water with ice, in the sink. And then you get a shot, like, from the mirror. The camera is supposed to be the mirror, but it's also what Chiron would be seeing as he's staring at it. And it makes you feel so deeply like how Chiron is feeling at that moment too. And at the same time, it is just like this portrait of a person. And it's one of those cases in cinema where you could take every shot and like separate it from each other, and it would look like photographs. And I've seen so many stills from this film since it came out, and you can tell it's like a film that was just photographed one by one throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, that ice in the sink scene for me too. This movie makes you feel every experience, and emotionally, obviously, it's extremely deep. But that scene too with the ice, it juxtaposes the amount of like, it's literally a temperature check, because everything that happens before that is like everything that is causing heat into your body. Like the embarrassment that he faced, the passion not long before it, this finally being vulnerable, all of these warm feelings, and then the embarrassment, rage, shame, being lectured at until he can't even hear who's talking to him anymore. All of that followed immediately. We cut to a really cold scene with his face in the ice, and you're like, it's that kind of one after the other, that just like how hot something is and how cold it is on so many levels. It's so much symbolism. I don't know who wanted to talk first.
I'm not sure, depending on what we're going to talk about. I want to talk about the cuts in between 1, 2, and 3, and the little notice between the difference there. I thought that was incredibly effective. The complete use of blackness and darkness to cut off an existing chapter, to put that behind in the viewer's thought, to leave a 5 to 10 second gap where you're looking at a black screen with the small exception, and then you move on to the next one. Eric, were you going to talk about the black screen there at all?
No, actually.
Okay.
I was going to talk about...
Just real quick,
ahead.
though. So between Act 1 and Act 2, we get the black screen, and there's a small blue dot that flashes about twice, or maybe 3 times. And between the next scene, between 2 and 3, it's changed to red. And exactly what you just said, Kelly, that's all I needed to hear. Like, that's it. You got the cold side of it, or the emotional, and then just, I don't know, just the juxtaposition between red and blue, and those two scenes just seemed a lot of what they were going for.
Yeah, it's the turning point in his life where he was finally, I'm going to be a little more vulnerable. No, I'm not. I'm actually going to completely now disengage and harden myself and be cold. And I mean, chef's kiss 100 times. Eric?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to focus on the shot, too, of Juan holding Little in the sea, and how this film uses the ocean and the beach as kind of a stand-in for comfort for Chiron, and it all derives from that scene. And what also, like Kevin was talking about here, was positive masculinity. All the men in this film that are actually positive to Chiron's life, they're vulnerable people. There are people that are allowing themselves to be vulnerable with Chiron. I love the Mahershala Ali's depiction of Juan, and also this film just showing a drug dealer who is actually a very positive like figure in Chiron's life, but like with the caveat that he's a drug dealer and is selling his mom drugs. And you know, you wonder how Juan might have gotten to this point. And it was the same where Chiron ended up doing that, because you know, he went to juvie, he didn't graduate, and he just got thrown right into the street out of juvie. And you would probably think that maybe the same things happened to Juan too. Yet inside, like, Juan is actually this vulnerable, just a good father figure to Chiron in his life when he's just there with him one-on-one. And that dichotomy is so brilliantly done. I definitely think that scene in the ocean, though, it really took home Juan's character, and it probably won Mahershala Ali the Emmy too. And just like, it was just so beautifully done.
There's the end of his story arc too.
Not the Emmy, sorry, the Oscar.
Yeah,
Oscar.
The
The end of
Oscar.
his story, the Oski. The end of his arc being left to the interpretation of the viewer too was so brilliantly done, because it was a cautionary tale for what happens to Black's character, essentially. Like, he can be this positive outlook, but at the end of the day, he's a drug runner who's probably going to be taken out at any point in time, because that's the nature of the job. And it probably destroyed Chiron's character to have that influence ripped out from his life. And it's just how, you know, it's all just so, it could just taken away from you at a moment.
Yeah. We're talking about vulnerable men and men that hang out by the ocean with Chiron and the ending. So we need to talk about Kevin as a character, as a friend, as something more. For me, that third act, I want to talk about all the acts, but that third act, Kevin, is just, my heart swells. What a beautiful story between the two of them, and a rekindling and like a negotiation of terms with like a lot of good intentions. I'm glad that we got to see the movie end in the way that it did. But let's talk about Kevin. That's a movie title as well, isn't it? So there's something about Kevin.
I think so.
But let's talk about the Kevin of this movie. Eric, would you like to open us up?
Well, Kevin, was Chiron's like childhood friend and ended up becoming his one-time lover. And that scene on the beach is another scene, where the two colors in this film, I'll just go right here. This is what Tarell McCraney said. The dichotomy between black and blue stands for tough and vulnerable, with black bodies often hovering between the two. In Chiron's situation, the black body, which can be seen as inherently vulnerable in American society, must be tough in order to survive, as seen by Chiron's final, very masculine and dominant identity. But like in this scene with Kevin where they, share an intimate moment, it's way more blue, and it's just like the most vulnerable scene we've seen from the film so far. And I would say there were some, vulnerable moments when Little and Juan, they shared vulnerable moments, but in a different way. And, in the end, we do finally get that quote, "You're the only man that's touched me." Chiron says that to Kevin. And in that scene where they share an intimate moment, there was like a real, like, I see who you are and I'm okay with it. And he never felt that before growing up. It was something that like he like was constantly struggling with, this self-acceptance and who he really was and who he wanted to portray to the world. And obviously that leads him to becoming an extremely buff drug dealer. The character of Kevin, he's put there as somebody, and not just like as a plot mover, but somebody that can be vulnerable with Chiron, even though we do get a scene of him ending up having to beat up Chiron, but like it was because if he didn't beat him up, then the bullies probably would have beat him up, and then he would have been bullied too. And it's just this cycle of toxic masculinity that just keeps like rolling down a hill. But it actually comes back in the end to be a happy ending, and just the vulnerability, I think, that you feel from the film, it really like hits you hard.
Yeah, I like that Kevin's like he is like an opposite of Chiron in a lot of ways, in that especially during their teen years, he's like bombastic and sexual and talking about it and moves around with a lot of confidence, and even as a kid he gets along with the bullies, but he gets along with Chiron, and he's the only like bridge between them. He's the only one in those shots that all the bullies are staring at us. He's not part of it until he, does what he needs. I say needs to do. See how even like I am like caught up in it. Kevin, do you want to talk about Kevin?
I do. So first thing I want to talk about is the actor a little bit. So Tarell Jerome is the one who plays 16-year-old Kevin, and I thought that he did such a great job in bringing forth somebody who the audience had to question his authenticity, his motivations, had to kind of look at him from a perspective of whether or not we care about our main character and how much we entrust in Kevin, and how that beach scene does such a huge job of moving forward, not just the whole plot of the film, but of our characters in general. So Tarell Jerome's performance during this was fantastic, and it came out that he was basically a high schooler that was basically caught up in a casting net, we'll say, when they were looking for younger individuals in the Miami area, and he had just started his undergrad when he got this role. So it's truly one of those things where he was kind of green around the ears and learning about the trade in general. So to be put into that situation where I can't imagine those guys on that beach trying to film that scene. Everybody must have been nervous as hell. The director, both the kids, they weren't allowed to interact with each other a lot before these scenes. We hear that they basically had to stay apart when they were learning these things, and Barry Jenkins was very much under the idea that they had to chop wood, as he says. So figure it out, figure it amongst themselves. It's a certain way that actors basically can get a lot more passion out of their performances if they somehow can figure out the motivations of their characters without being told exactly how to do it. So there wasn't a lot of rehearsal between these two guys before they got into this scene, and I think it was just done really well. You had touched on it, Kelly, that our older Kevin has this warmth about him, and I kind of also talked about it when I said the diner had that vibe about it. But the performance in general, especially in that scene where he cooks the meal, right? Where we get the diner scene where he goes through and he cooks the meal for Black, and the love and just the physical acting that had to go into that whole thing. And just, I liked his character. I liked the way that he moved things forward, and it truly was a tale of two people, and it couldn't have been done without all of the Kevins, all three of them, really.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, and I want to definitely talk about the last scene with Kevin cooking him the meal. There's a thing with food in this movie, and how, Chiron is definitely a food insecure person because his mom is a drug addict, and she loses her job and eventually becomes a prostitute, but like all of her money's probably going towards drugs. And so Juan and Teresa, played by Janelle Monáe, who is a very famous musician actually, they nurture him with food, and that is kind of the pathway into Chiron opening up to them. And then now later we have Kevin cooking Chiron a meal, and it is this kind of like nurturing. And he even says it like, this is grandma rules. You have to open up to me when I make you food. And I think that's very understated just in general, and just people cooking for each other, just what a simple act of love and nurturing that is. And I think that final scene, Kevin cooking for him, it kind of opens the pathway for Chiron to finally, feel vulnerable and to feel self-acceptance again. But also it's like, makes a lot of sense for Kevin's character to end up being this person who is wants to nurture people and wants to offer them food. I don't know, it just makes sense for both the characters where they ended up, Mm-hmm. Kevin, opening up his own restaurant, and like after he apparently went to prison and everything.
I don't think it's his diner. I think he's a line cook.
Okay, he's Kevin being a line cook at this restaurant after he went to prison, just trying to have an honest job. That was like such a interesting thing. Like, it makes you wonder where Chiron might end up, because he has been a drug dealer for so long. Like, can somebody who either went to prison or got into the drug game, like, what does that feel like for that person? And it definitely leads, it's a question at the end, what will Chiron end up as? But at least he has his self-acceptance and somebody that loves and nurtures him to lean on.
Yeah, at least that door was opened. At least the one person who could really see him saw him. And it's just, I know that he says, and we've already said it too, you're the only man that's ever touched me, but it could make me cry just thinking about it now, because it's more than just that. It is so much more. I mean, what else? Like, I don't want to even... It's such a great mastercraft of a story. It's like anything that I could say on top of it is just like, I don't even want to dilute it with my own added narrative. I'm like, everybody needs to just see this and experience it, and that's what it is too. This is like what a movie is. You experience it. You
don't have to overanalyze it, and there's a lot of this, like, for us, sometimes we do overanalyze it, but that's mostly to the point where we're trying to pull blood out of a stone, as we say, because the movie is terrible and we need to make content. This one doesn't have any of those problems, and we can just rave on it, and I'm sure we can continue to talk about it for a very long time. But a movie that's simplistic in its theme, but also finds a way to really deliver it on all formats, is just so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and so refreshing. The whole entire thing. We need to touch on soundtrack as well. And I remember watching this and like streaming the soundtrack afterwards, because like the word I just used and will reuse is it's refreshing. It's like a high art kind of soundtrack for this story of extreme poverty and drug-ridden streets. They put this beautiful symphony on top of it that completely enhances this, like, the choices of the film. So perfectly used, and the way that as Chiron is getting tougher, colder, harder, the theme that we hear when he's a child that's super shy starts to get a little distorted as well. So these kind of thoughts follow through. But then we have contemporary music going in, and before I keep talking about it forever, I need to let you both weigh in on it. I'm usually picking on Eric first every time, so why not continue in that suit? Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely loved the classic. There was classical music in this, but then there was some beautiful like instrumentals, kind of minimal horn sections, very minimal like instrumental music at points, and completely juxtaposed, I guess, the atmosphere that we were in. But then at the same time, like, our camera shots were so beautiful that it was almost like a beautiful symphony to go along with all of this amazing cinematography that we were seeing. The choice to put like kind of this more minimal instrumental music in this film, Barry Jenkins himself said he wanted to depict the hood as like this art house world where he's looking at it very artistically, as opposed to in other films we always, you know, see it depicted as this kind of fast-paced like action, and they put hip-hop into a lot of films that are placed in the hood. But Barry Jenkins wanted to look at it completely differently. It plays into the vulnerability of the whole film, but also just kind of it really brings home like how artistic this whole film is. Mm-hmm.
Kevin, the music man.
So, this score was created by one Nicholas Britell. Nicholas Britell is basically a Hollywood score composer, and he's done very well for himself in that genre. He was also responsible for the backdrop for The Big Short, which came out in 2015, and then, of course, this one that came out right afterwards. I noticed the soundtrack at least made note of it within the first, 5-10 minutes, as I usually do if it's very good, because it did a really good job of, like you said, blending the contemporary music. So we were kind of making sure to keep grounded in that hip-hop vibe, the low bass cuts, and just some of the things that we got from being in Miami. We also then, speaking of being in Miami, we also get some Spanish music throughout this and interludes. We get just the different parts that make this feel like the location it's supposed to be in. And again, that's just huge kudos to the team trying to make this as authentic as possible. You had touched on how the changing of the theme through each scene or each segment of this movie, it was very poignant, and they made a very, very big deal of making that obvious, we'll call it. There's a technique that they try to use, which is called chopped and screwed in this particular film, with basically taking the idea of taking a theme, slowing it down, distorting it, changing some of the tonality on it, and creating something new. And that chopped and screwed method is an old hip-hop method from the 80s that basically popularized itself in Houston. A guy named DJ Screw kind of got it started, but it was the same idea where it took out some of the fast hip-hop beats that were coming out after Afrika Bambaataa came out with some of his big music, and they're just like, wait, we're going to rotate it a little bit. So the idea that in this film they took some authentic music, found a way to continue to put it into the beautiful aspects of this, and then still did really cool orchestral things. And the low bass notes that we get are cello notes, not necessarily subwoofer notes. And I think that's just a really cool way to bring music throughout your whole movie from start to finish. So like everything else with this film, just gorgeous. It fit the mood. We talked about that ocean scene time and time again, but somehow the scenery and the music for that scene is about as perfect of a movie shot as I've ever seen, period. And it has a lot to do with the classical music that is playing and just kind of that vibe that you get. Overall, just phenomenal job. And it's definitely a soundtrack that I will listen to again on its own without having this movie involved at all, just because it's something that you would just kind of want to take home.
Definitely.
And Nicholas Britell, I guess, did the Secession theme song. I just looked it up.
Way.
So he scored all 4 seasons of Secession. And so that iconic theme song from Secession, he did that.
That completely tracks. with like how this movie sounded too, and just how fitting it was. I like that when you mentioned the cello, I was like, that's like the perfect instrument for this story, because that is a strong, masculine, like velvety, vulnerable sound is what comes out of the cello. I just had to nerd out on that for a second.
That's great. No, you're absolutely right. 100%. I did find it fun that they didn't have any of the actors of the boys meet each other at any point in time. I kind of had mentioned that earlier when they were doing rehearsals, but young Chiron, middle Chiron, and elderly Chiron, none of them were able to meet each other because they didn't want the director to have it, or didn't want the actors to have any parody. He wanted them to completely act off of the feeling of the character, not what the physical appearances or mannerisms of the other guys that they were representing. And it's interesting to me how throughout the whole film, while they physically don't look like each other, I can tell that Chiron through all three characters. Like the mannerisms of Little come through in Black, and the same with Kevin's character. Like the way that our writer-director has been able to basically command this presence from his cast to be able to just look in someone's eyes and check and like, hey, this huge beefed out 200 whatever plus dude is this vulnerable 6-year-old kid. How in the world did you pull that off by just making me look at his eyes and have him just talk a little bit? There's something really, really special about what they were able to accomplish with that, having no interaction with the actors at all, and just truly have it, trust me, this is how I want you to do it, and give me your best performance. We had also kind of mentioned a little bit earlier of some of our other performances. We talk about Mom, right? We talk about Paula, and is it Naomie Harris? Holy cow, that was a tour de force of a acting job to be able to accurately represent what someone who struggles with a crack addiction would look like. And then not only to that, but then to accurately represent kind of the phases as she goes from her stable job to having to sell the TV to begging money from your son, sockless on the front lawn, to then eventually going to rehab. Just like her journey itself was such a beautiful envelope inside the other journeys that we're seeing. And it couldn't have been done without Naomie Harris. Naomie Harris was quoted as saying that she was never willing to ever go into that role of doing a stereotypical Black performance, meaning someone who would show a crack addicted individual. But she trusted the team so much that she was willing to kind of go there and give her all, and it was just absolutely incredible. So her and the other performances from some of our smaller characters really just made the whole thing in general awesome. So I just wanted to touch on that.
And yeah, I think what I love how this film goes from childhood to teenage to adult, it kind of shows that every single person you look at, they had a journey to get to where they were, and there's reasons for why they are the way they are. For example, we see Chiron's mom at the end, she's just kind of very broken down, finally clean, but seems just so depressed and sorrowful. We see Chiron, who's also a drug dealer, but since we've been following them from his childhood, we see that not every person is just how they appear or how they seem. There's this whole story to everybody's life that really shows how they got to where they were. There's reasons behind why people are the way they are, and I feel like in society too much we kind of just point fingers at people and box them in all the time, and we don't actually try to step into other people's shoes and understand their whole story. And that's why I think this film is just so good, that it shows the three phases of each of these people's lives, and it shows how there's reasons behind everything for why people are the way they are,
Yeah, I didn't know that all of our Chiron actors never interacted with each other. That really blows me away, because you can 100% look and see Black's inner child in the way that he behaves. And is it just because great storytelling has gone the whole way? That helps, but I feel like you just see it inside of him. He portrays it's just strong performances everywhere. Every single person involved. Anything else, or are we ready for reviews?
I think That wraps it up for me.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Let's start with Kevin.
Fantastic. I'm going to keep this relatively short, and I say that, and I probably will end up ranting. But we've been complimentary of this film from the beginning. Complimentary? There we go. And it's for very good reason. When you give a film review, you want to touch on, obviously, all the positives, but then you want to try to find some negatives. And with this one, we haven't mentioned one. There hasn't been a time where any of us kind of were like, yeah, this movie was groundbreaking. This movie was revolutionary in the sense that it did something with a mainstream platform that hadn't been seen in mainstream movie up until that point. It did it with flair, it did it with class, it did it with an ability to talk about real life things and not make the audience shy away from them, but embrace it. The skills that we see from the teams putting this together, from our casting director, from the cinematography to the, our writer director, to the screenplay, to every single person involved, there has been a home run in every single aspect, and that's just a huge testament to the idea where this all started and the ability to kind of empathize with your subjects, know that you have something to relate to them, and then know that you have a subject to give to the world. This film was done beautifully. It was done with a lot of care, and I think that when you look back at the greats, the movies that really stand out in something that is bigger than movie history, I think that you look back and Moonlight is definitely one of those films. I'm giving it an A+24. It really doesn't have any small downsides for me. It is a movie that I want to share with anybody who doesn't know about A24 and doesn't know about the production company, but also just a movie that you want to share with just someone who you feel could appreciate the story, or someone who maybe has seen it and wants to see it again. And this is a lot of what individuals struggle with as far as feeling pride or home or an acceptance. And if more films like this can share a new generation that it's okay to be who you are, it's okay to embrace that, but it's also okay to ask that question, who is you, Chiron? Because we don't know, and Chiron doesn't know, and that is okay too. So watch this movie with an open mind and an open heart, and just be ready to kind of embrace what you see, and don't look at it from a review standpoint. But if you do, you're going to be in from a good treat too, because it's actually worth looking at from a critical aspect as well. So I guess what I'm saying is I already gave my review. When you're done with this, go watch it if you already haven't. It's well worth your time.
Mm-hmm. Eric, do you want to go or you want me to?
I can go.
Do it.
So the only other film I've ever given a A+24 to was Ex Machina, and I think I gave that film a A+24 because on top of the acting being phenomenal, the script being fantastic, and the cinematography being just picturesque, it was like Ex Machina was a groundbreaking film in its own right. And this one was definitely groundbreaking, and like I've never seen a film done quite in the way that this film was done. And just everything from the plot to the script to the acting and cinematography, it just like it is done in a way that I've never seen before in film. And it's, everything you want in a film to be unique in American cinema. I've been all over the place talking about this because this film is so hard to kind of put into words about how much it means to me and how much it resonates with me. And I think the first time I actually saw this, I actually was thrown off a bit by the tonal shift at the ending and how sweet it was and how accepting and loving and vulnerable it was. Like, it actually threw me off because of all the drama that built up to it. And then the third act is just like kind of like a big hug. Watching it this time, I'm a different person now watching this. I've come out as a bisexual man, and I think I was like ready to feel vulnerable, and I felt like Chiron deserved that self-acceptance and that happy ending was earned. And then that childhood kid that he was, that we see at the very end with that beautiful shot that we zoom into, you can like look at your own self and be like, I still have that like little child in me at all times too. And that personality, it's still there. Just kind of, it's the core of me at all times. And it's just kind of what, society has pinned on you that changes you in a way. And that's why I think this film, I think I love it so much now, and might be my favorite A24 film to date, right up there with Ex Machina. It's probably right at the same level. And so I'm going to give it an A+24. This is, one of my favorite films of all time. And I think in 50 years, we still will be talking about this film as a turning point in American cinema.
Yeah, agreed on that. Definitely, I feel like if I were to name maybe the top 10 movies that have really impacted me personally, just on my watching experience, this one's up there in the top 5 even. I'm not going to ever make that list because I don't want to even compare movies that are that impactful to me, but this one's way up there. What do I usually say about all of my critiques is make me feel something. What does this movie do? It takes you by the hands and makes you feel it the entire way through. And that couldn't be done if it didn't hit all the marks on every single aspect of filmmaking. And like we've been speaking throughout this whole entire review, what negatives did we have? I really couldn't change a thing about this. I really think it's just a masterclass in filmmaking, in storytelling, in the breaking of stereotypes in cinema historically. I'm so glad that this story is told. I'm so happy to see these vulnerable, strong characters, these fully fleshed out characters, this good and bad within every person, this actual love and vulnerability that's shown between these characters, and the inner child, like we're saying too. What love is more pure than that kind of love too? There's no walls between us. Let's break it all back down. And the fact that can be done over years and years, but you got to keep that core to you, and everybody has it there. You just need to give it a chance. I don't know. It's a beautiful story, beautiful, beautiful cinematography, soundtrack, acting, like we've been saying. I'm hyping all this part up. You guys know how I feel about it already. And I'm going to square it out between the three of us with another A+24 review.
Bam.
And with that, everyone, thank you for going along on this ride with us. I know that it's not nearly as good as actually watching the movie Moonlight, which I recommend we all do over and over again because there's so many more layers to it. And thank you to everyone involved in even making that film for doing it. I hope that the amount of lives that you've impacted, that you see that every single day for as long as you live. Thank you for making this movie.
Thanks, A24.
And thank you, A24.
And Barry Jenkins and Tarell McCraney.
You name them, man. You keep going,
yes.
right? Every single one of them.
And thank you, audience, for listening. If you appreciate what we do, if you want to have conversations with us, we're available on all social media. Reach out. Let's get in touch. Follow us. Review us. And most importantly, thanks so much for listening.
Bye-bye.
A24.